The wind swept across the plains, carrying dust like an old ballad, the kind that settled into the bones of a man who'd spent too many nights alone. The sky burned with the last embers of daylight, a hush of violet and gold before the stars claimed the heavens. A single cabin stood against the vastness, small and weathered, scarred by seasons of storms and silence. Inside lived Lucas, a cowboy who'd chosen solitude, not by desire, perhaps, but by necessity. His boots on the wooden floor were often the only sound, a reminder that a man still breathed within those walls. He'd built a life on quiet, burying memories of faces he no longer dreamed of and wounds he left unmeasured. That evening, Lucas was mending a stirrup, his fingers rough from years of leather and rope, when a faint cry pierced the wind. He dismissed it at first, thinking it a trick of the prairie, which sometimes whispered to deceive. But the cry came again, fragile yet desperate, carrying words. He stepped into the dusk, his breath catching as he scanned the horizon. Two small figures approached, battling the vastness of the land. A girl, no older than 6, strained to support a woman leaning heavily on her. Beside them trudged a boy, perhaps 4, clutching the woman's torn shawl, his eyes wide with worry far older than his years. The woman, their mother, moved with trembling steps, her body bent in pain, as if the earth itself rejected her frailty. Lucas watched, his heart tightening in a way it hadn't for seasons. The children carried both courage and terror in their gaze. As they drew near, the girl's voice rose, quivering like a leaf in the wind. "Settlers broke Mama's ribs. Can she rest in your cabin?" The word struck Lucas deeper than any blade. He stared at the girl's brave defiance, the boy's trembling lip, and the woman, pale with pain but unbroken in dignity. For a moment, he was frozen, as if the world had forced his silence to confront an innocence he'd long ignored. "Come inside," he said, his voice low and unsteady, words he hadn't spoken aloud in months. He reached for the woman, but she shook her head faintly, resisting his aid. Yet her legs faltered, and Lucas, with the care of a man who knew sorrow's weight, lifted her into his arms. She was too light, frail from hunger and exhaustion, not just broken ribs. The children followed, wide-eyed but trusting, as he carried her through the doorway. The cabin smelled of pine and smoke, modest but warmer than the unforgiving night. He laid her on his bed, covering her with a wool blanket. The girl, Ella, clung to her mother's hand, while the boy, John, perched on a stool, tracing the blanket's edge as if to anchor her presence. Lucas stoked the fire, its crackling light revealing the woman's sharp angles of suffering and the resilience in her gaze. She whispered her name, Luna, barely audible, like a star refusing to fade. Lucas repeated it softly, testing its weight. He offered water, which she drank gratefully, though pain etched lines across her brow. Ella spoke again, her voice steadier despite shimmering eyes. "Mama tried to walk, but every step hurt. We didn't know where else to go." John nodded, adding, "We saw your light." Lucas's throat tightened. These small souls carried burdens larger than the prairie itself, and something long buried in him stirred awake. The night deepened, stars scattering like silver dust. Lucas cooked a simple stew, its warmth filling the cabin. He served the children first, watching their hunger overtake their shyness. Luna managed only a few spoonfuls before pain forced her back against the pillow. Lucas didn't press her, setting the bowl aside and sitting by the fire, his eyes on the dancing shadows. In those hours, silence wasn't empty but a kind of communion. The children slept, curled together on a pallet near the fire. Luna's breathing was shallow but steady, her eyes carrying unvoiced questions. Perhaps she wondered why a man alone would open his home, or perhaps she recognized something in him, loneliness meeting loneliness, sorrow answering sorrow. Lucas met her gaze once, then turned back to the flames, feeling a weight he wasn't ready to name. Days passed, weaving the strangers into Lucas's solitude. He rose early, tending chores, but now small voices greeted him, and footsteps followed to the door. Ella carried kindling in her little arms, determined to help, while John chased chickens, laughing as they scattered. Inside, Luna rested, her body mending slowly, her spirit unyielding. Lucas treated her ribs with herbs from Mrs. Callahan, a kind widow from 2 ridges over. She asked no questions, offering what she could with a nod, as if she understood some wounds weren't meant to be spoken of too soon. In quiet evenings, Lucas and Luna found a rhythm in their words. She spoke of her children, Ella's hope like a lantern, John's laughter breaking through shadows. She avoided details of the settlers who'd hurt her, but her eyes told the story in scars. Lucas listened, offering silence when words were too heavy. The children grew comfortable, their trust given freely, perhaps sensing his silence was a shield, not indifference. One evening, Ella asked why he lived alone. He paused, the fire crackling. Because sometimes, little one, a man thinks he has nothing left to share. Ella frowned, considering this. But you shared with us, she said simply, curling beside her sleeping brother. Lucas glanced at Luna, seeing her eyes glisten with quiet tears she tried to hide. Fear returned when news came of settlers stirring trouble nearby, displacing families. Lucas felt old instincts rise. He reinforced the cabin, sharpened tools, and kept watch by night, determined to protect these souls who'd stumbled into his life like fragile birds seeking shelter. One night, a storm lashed the windows, and Luna stirred, whispering apologies to her sleeping children for being weak, for slowing them, for their shared bruises. Her voice cracked, and Lucas, listening from his chair, felt his heart split. He sat beside her, offering no words, only presence, steady as the fire. She turned to him, tears slipping silently, and something unspoken passed between them. She saw he didn't view her as broken but as unbearably brave, and he saw her strength humbled him. The storm woke the children, who clung to their mother in fright. Lucas pulled them close, calming them with steady arms. Luna tried to rise but collapsed into him, her breathing ragged, pain overwhelming. For a moment, Lucas feared he'd lose her, terror surging through him. He whispered her name, Luna, again and again, as if it could tether her to life. Her eyes opened, fragile but alive, and he could no longer hide what had grown within him. When the storm softened and the children slept, Lucas sat beside Luna. Firelight flickered across his face, his hands trembling slightly, voice steady. He confessed how her presence had broken his silence, how her courage showed him a strength greater than any he'd known. She and her children had become his reason to breathe each morning. His words were raw, stripped of the walls he'd built. Luna listened, tears falling. For so long, she'd been seen as fragile, pitted. But in his words, she felt whole, resilient, worthy of love. She gripped his hand, her lips trembling, unable to speak fully, but her eyes said what her voice couldn't. They sat, hands clasped, firelight wrapping them in warmth. Outside, the storm passed, inside, a different storm broke, silence yielding to confession, loneliness to love. In that fragile moment, two strangers found shelter not just in wood but in each other. Love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it enters on broken ribs and children's pleas, blooming quietly, steady as a hearth fire against a storm. If this story has touched you, let it linger. Share a thought, leave a mark, let others know you walk these plains with us. From where do you watch?